Hello and welcome to Digital Infra Network. I'm Seb Zon, and in today's session, I will be chatting to the Vice President and General Manager at PermAlert, Mr. Will Leong, and we will be discussing how liquid cooling is driving sustainable decision-making. So welcome today, Will. How are you?
Seb, great. Thanks for having me to be a part of this platform. So it's a good opportunity to get together on this. So.
Yeah, it's a pleasure to have you on this session today. For our audience, can you give us just a little introduction to yourself and your role within the company?
Yeah, sure. Seb, I think I'm the Vice President, General Manager for PermAlert. PermAlert is a division of PermaPipe, which is a pre-insulated pipe manufacturer based in the U.S. So I want to say we started since the 60s. Obviously, the little bit of background on the business is PermAlert has started out as an ancillary product really to this pre-insulated piping solution business, predominantly in the infrastructure side, right, of the space. I would say since the dot-com days, 20-some years ago, really PermAlert had really started providing standalone solution, leak detection solution into data center space. And fast forward 20 years later today, we are definitely finding our solution across many different data centers across the globe.
Okay, very interesting stuff. 20 years is a long time since you've definitely seen a lot of change. How have you seen the liquid cooling solutions evolve in the data center space in that time?
Yeah, it's funny you say that. While data center for 20 years, you see some of the advances and some of the other stuff you still see, hey, they've been slowly evolving. But I would say liquid cooling, quite honestly, this probably dates back to my days of tinkering with PCs and in my high school or college days, where I remember in the late 90s or even early 2000s, right? We were serious gamers and tried to rig your own little water cooling solutions. But I would say really over those period of time, even in the last 10, 15 years or so, you've seen the conversation came back. But it wasn't able to get any sort of a mainstream support. Really, I think the chip industries ultimately was able to, every few years, really pushing the limit, shrinking the transistors, and really get more power efficient with the chips. So I think that was really the main reason that hasn't been able to take off. But I think the dynamic is definitely shifting. I definitely noticed, I would say since 2018, 2019, there was more serious conversations as we see more higher and higher density racks, and definitely, and some of us that believe Moore's law, right, is really reaching its limit.
Yep.
And also the growing focus on ESG, sustainability, and definitely not to mention what happened right now today with the Ukraine-Russia conflict that impact energy costs.
Yeah.
I think those really created I won't call it a perfect storm, so to speak, that really put liquid cooling kind of front and center, potentially primed to be a mainstream technology.
So today, what do you think the key challenges are that are preventing the industry from adopting liquid cooling at scale?
Yeah, I think just like if I kind of make a reference back to, if you think about my dad's days of driving air-cooled cars, for example, right? But I always remember that you go up the hill, you always worry about, when the first liquid cool or water cool engine comes around, you always worry about overheating when you go up the hill where it's too steep, right? It really took a while. It took various different players in the internal combustion engine players and various different pieces over, I would say, decades to finally come to, hey, realizing the power or really the efficiency of using water cool. I think that applies definitely to what we're seeing in liquid cooling today in the data center space, right? I think there are a lot of key players along the value chain. It's important, I think, to make sure that all these key players definitely realizing the ultimate benefits, really comes with liquid cooling, and really align the interests to try to drive a solution into the market. I think that's certainly one big challenge that we need to get to until a mass adoption, if you will, in the data center space.
Yeah, interesting stuff. So, can you elaborate a little bit on how the PermAlert system works?
Yeah, the permanent systems really is a rope style sensing cable system. Okay. Um, we deploy, as I mentioned, over the course of the last 20 years across many data centers across the world. Most common application that we do today really is any water leak from the chill water systems, um, or even in the old battery, lead acid batteries monitoring as well. We do able to provide a solution, so as well as diesel fuel on a backup power. So effectively, any of these liquid comes into contact with our rope style sensing cable, then we can detect there's a leak in the system, right? Or anywhere in the facility.
And so that would be that's instantaneous. And what sort of sizes are we talking about? Minuscule droplets of liquid.
Yeah, so funny you mentioned that. I think that really isn't any sort of an industry standard per se in terms of what constitute as a leak or how sensitive. With that said, right, I think given our experience in mission critical space and data centers and so on, that we really operated from a standpoint that any pinhole leak, if you will, that can build up over time is definitely a threat to the operation of the data center. So we have really refined our solution really to be able to detect any minuscule leak to try to provide some early detections, if you will, to the data center operator. Now,
Mm.
outside of just the sizing of the leak, if you will, from a response time, if you think about it, obviously sensitivity to detect leak is key, but the response time to be able to communicate back and seeing, hey, there's a leak, there is some standard scientific formula out there. We're seeing more so today in the industry, in like a insurance industry. For example, like the likes of FM Global, for example, they definitely have expectation in terms of detecting leaks, especially hazardous leaks, right, liquid leak, to be really react within seconds. So that seems to be somewhat of a standard.
Mm. Interesting. So, how can undetected leaks manifest and ultimately cause huge service disruptions?
I think we're seeing a growth of tremendous growth. I would say last decade of AI, machine learning. We're seeing automations, more and more sensors, closed loop systems, deployed across different kind of industry. Data center definitely not excluded from that. I think you definitely find most data center today are really manned by handful of staff. So any sort of leaks or exception or anomaly conditions definitely requires some early detection so that you can alert and address before it becomes catastrophic.
Mm. Okay. Now, what are some of the challenges of leak detection when it comes to liquid cooling solutions within the data center space?
Yeah, I think as I said, I think this space definitely started to get interesting for the last couple of years, and we've been fortunate enough to be working with a handful of leading solution provider in the liquid cooling, and definitely with a major hyperscaler in the U.S. as well. So there were a lot of insight, if you will, to understand some of the challenges in the space. Um, One of the top things that comes to mind definitely is the wide ranging of different kind of liquid cool solutions and the kind of liquid that they use,
Mm.
depending on their solutions. So you see from the most common like water mixed with glycol, DI
Yep.
water, or even dielectric fluid for immersion cooling, for example. Even
Yep.
within those, there's a wide ranging of properties.
That's interesting. Not a lot of people know that. So there's a different viscosity, is there, to the different liquids?
That's right. So the different properties will really presents a different kind of challenges. At least take, for example, a conventional leak detection system, rope style, let's say, right? The the original conventional system are always resistive based system. So effectively, you can only detect something that is conductive. Obviously, in the case of using chill water or
Right.
glycol, they're electrically conductive, then you definitely can detect that and sound an alarm when you come into contact with it. But when you start to get into some of these more exotic, I'll call it exotic liquid dielectric fluid, for example,
Yeah.
they are not all that electrically conductive. That presents a significant challenge in terms of performance from what you expect typically on this kind of system to perform when detecting leak, and to what happens when you get into detecting dielectric fluid. I think this is where one aspect of where PermAlert underlying technology really excel and differentiates. Over the years, what we really invest in our R&D ultimately is really drove our system today to be able to virtually detect any liquid. So I think our commitment to try to drive that focus really can help, in my mind, this journey, if it were to transition into a liquid cooling space, because I think our leak detection system is truly unique, that we can be really agnostic to any different kind of liquid to detect.
Well, it sounds really exciting, and I really thank you for your time today, Will. I look forward to catching up with you again in the not too distant future and finding out how things are going at PermAlert. But for now, Will Leong, Vice President and General Manager at PermAlert, thank you so much for your time today.
Seb, thank you.